We bring you this special radio television broadcast in order to give you the very latest information on an amazing phenomenon.
From the files of Schlock and Awe, welcome to Natural Selection, the home of the DTV Creature Feature. Here are your hosts, Matty Budrewicz and Dave Wain.
Don't you dare touch me! Stand back! No! No!
Hello, and welcome to Natural Selection, the home of the Creature Feature podcast. My name is Dave Wain, and normally sat to my right-hand side is Matty Budrewicz, but today he's not. He's away because we've got to do this remotely because things are going a little bit bat soup. I'm hoping that he's dug out that sex doll I gave him in order to, at least have me represented in his living room. And to be honest, it would probably have a great deal more charisma than me. But we will see. So, Matty Budrewicz, are you there?
Hello, Dave. I am here in remote form, and I do indeed have a blow-up doll next to me in a baseball cap with a crudely drawn soul patch. And I really think it captures the essence of you.
Good. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, good. I can see it there, and it looks fantastic. It looks younger than me, to be honest, which is a bit of an insult, but I'm fine.
Oh, good. But this is all very strange, isn't it? As if we're recording a Creature Feature podcast remotely.
Yeah, it's unnerving, and it's I'm hoping that the audio will be okay for our regular crew of listeners.
I think we missed an opportunity to talk about bats as well. We should have really done that this time. We should have done Lewis Morneau's Bats and Bats 2 Human Harvest.
Yeah, not enough people are talking about bats at the moment, so yeah, I think it might be a little bit too soon, but, certainly I want to pencil in for a future episode. But today, what are we discussing today? And you're going to tell us all about that.
Well, today we are going to be looking at two films from the halcyon days of SyFy. Well, formerly, as it was back then, the SyFy channel. And to me, that makes sense because, well, as we say, we're living in the middle of a global pandemic, and we're about to be massacred now by a wave of murder hornets. So the way I see it, we are just one lavalantula or Sharknado away from actually living in the plot of a SyFy channel movie. So, yeah, we're going to talk about SyFy Originals.
Okay.
So the SyFy Original was launched by the channel's current executive vice president of programming and original movies, Thomas Vitale, and his cohorts Ray Cannella and Chris Regina in 2001. Vitale, Cannella and Regina, what they used to do was they would approach a production house like people we've talked about so far, like Cinetel or New Image, and they'd go to them with an idea or a concept. Obviously, as time went on, the companies themselves would start presenting them with ideas and concepts once they knew what SyFy were after. And so they'd go to these companies, and the SyFy lot would give Cinetel, New Image, etc., a flat fee of $750,000. The reasoning for that was, as Cannella explained to Wired in 2004, is that they wanted movies, not problems, so everyone got the same $750,000 deal. So, as the typical SyFy original costed between 1.4 and 1.8 million, the rest of the money that Cinetel, New Image, Active, UFO, all of the sort of in-house production service companies that SyFy were buying from and would start to buy product from, the rest of their budget would be made up from foreign licensing and domestic home video agreements. So basically, with something like, Cinetel's Snakehead Terror, they'd get $750,000 from SyFy, and then the rest would come from whatever company they had a deal with for the film's release in Europe or the film's DVD release in America. However, although everyone getting the same deal was what happened for the most part across the board, There was one company who had a slight edge over the competition, and well, at least for a short period, and that was Amberlight. They were owned by Universal, who of course own and operate the SyFy channel. While the stuff that they would make would run the gamut in terms of entertainment quality, the films do seem a little bit slicker, and dare I say it, a little bit better finance, a little healthier budget-wise. You know, it's pure speculation, you know, but considering that Active were owned by SyFy's parent company, chances are they probably had a little bit more than the $750,000 pumped into them. Anyway, Amberlight, they made a couple of okay-ish movies. They made Terminal Invasion with Bruce Campbell, which was done obviously at the peak of Bruce's cool. You know, if Chins Could Kill had just come out, he was about to hit the road on the Bubba Hotep tour, and you know, he was getting rave reviews for his performance as Elvis in that. So Terminal Invasion comes out, and for a while was like the second or third highest movie that SyFy had premiered.
Right.
Yeah, it was like it pulled in. It did gangbusters on the ratings. It was a record breaker for the channel. Amberlight, they'd never topped that in terms of ratings, but some of the movies were okay since. They had Do or Die, Threshold, and of course the two films that we're going to be looking at today, which are WEBS and Bugs.
You're listening to Natural Selection, the home of the DTV Creature Feature.
Sorry, what did you do?
I don't know. I think I just...
Shelly, I told you not to touch it. Turn it off. Don't move. Clear. Don't move. Don't move.
All right, look. This place is hot. We'll get out of this room. We'll call headquarters, and they'll call NEST. All right?
Okay. Wait a minute. What about this? I mean, we can't just leave this here.
Ray, no. Don't touch that. Ray.
What's that? See?
Where are we?
What the hell was that? How'd we get out here?
Why don't you wait for the guys? I'm gonna go look around.
Yeah. Okay. You're the boss. I'll just,
WEBS from 2003, directed by David Wu, and it hit SyFy, premiered on SyFy on the 28th of June 2003. We like a good spider film. We've covered a few good spider films, but would you say that, where would you place this in the pecking order of eight-legged DTVers?
Thank God you didn't say eight-legged freaks. We could have ended up in so much legal hot water there. It's at the bottom with Arachnid.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That low?
Yeah. Maybe even a little bit lower than Arachnid. It's weird. I had really fond memories of WEBS before going in to revisit it. I can remember seeing it. I didn't see it when it premiered on SyFy. I saw it a couple of years afterwards. I think I'd it was either watched late at night on TV or rented from, I don't know, it's when Sainsbury's used to do their little rental section. And I can just remember really enjoying it, but it just left me cold this time. I think I have outgrown WEBS.
Have you? Yeah, I wasn't that keen on it either. I mean, I know one of your rules has always been, it doesn't matter technically how bad it is, just never be boring. And that's its biggest fault, really, isn't it? It is just quite boring. It's not a long film. It's only 81, 82 minutes. But it's a struggle to get through, really, because I don't know. I can't, aside from the boring aspect, I can't really pinpoint many things that, you can put apportion full blame to, but yeah, it just doesn't really work.
It's a very repetitive experience, I think. The premise, I thought, is the premise is great, and it's really, really kooky and off the wall. It's this Richard Greco leading a bunch of these blue collar sparkies who are going to repair or dismantle the electrics in a building, and they end up stumbling across this, a dimension portal that takes them into an alternative Chicago. The film, of course, set in Chicago, even though it was shot in Toronto. And so they go into this alternative Chicago, which is overrun by spider zombies, basically. These sort of weird I Am Legend kind of mashups between spiders and, the Walking Dead. Well, more the Infected. It's like something more like 28 Days Later. 28 Days Later by way of 30 Days of Night, that kind of thing. That premise, wonderfully simple, really sells me. I love films like 30 Days of Night. I love Stakeland. I love all the different iterations of I Am Legend. I'm a big fan of to a certain extent. It cribs elements from Night of the Living Dead, from Dawn of the Dead, from Day of the Dead, but ultimately it's a very, very wearying film, because once they're in this spider realm, all it does, it just turns into an endless series of chases.
Yeah, and I mean, they're not the greatest chases to look at either, really. I mean, this other world is very drab. It's surrounded by sort of endless plastic sheeting. Decorating every
shock on a budget, like a parallel. And while I think that can be quite charming at times, considering how slickly photographed the film is, that they could have done. I don't know. They could have done something more than just set it among warehouses and bed sheets and just have people running around and screaming.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think the whole premise of where this portal goes to. I mean, that's the wearying thing. You do begin the film with, as you say, high hopes. I mean, certainly the initial few sequences in Chicago are fine. You can accept the whole issue with, the electricians heading into this building, and this power source that's still alive 15 years after the building was abandoned. But as soon as we go over that different dimension, it's just so drab. It's just there's nothing to really inject it with any dynamism or you just feel so cold. I mean, admittedly, I know you have a great fondness for Richard Grieco. He's been in some of your favorite films, from Jim Wynorski's Against the Law to David Dakota's Journey, Absolution, only a few years prior to that, but and he was in one of my favorite films as well from the 90s, which was Catman, where he becomes a cat. Everyone see Richard Grieco displaying feline properties, but in this he's just so bland. It's like you're transferring him to a different dimension in a whole new world. He's an electrician. He's an electrician. He's a blue collar worker, and he just seems. I've never seen anyone seem so unimpressed or just. He just takes to this new concept as, oh yeah, okay, so we're in this, alternate universe. That's fine. Yeah, that's great. And it's just his expression. I don't know what the direction was for him in this film, but he just seems like he just wants to be somewhere else. Although I will give him credit for his jumper. I think, as Fisherman's jumper, in this sort of roll neck, ribbed pastel blue endeavor, I think it's remarkable. So see it for Grieco's sweater, but don't see it for Grieco's performance, really.
He's always one of those actors who I always presume his default setting is scene chewing. He seems to really relish performance. He really has a very strong theatrical sense about him, and yet here I've never seen him so subdued and so muted.
He had a great line, though. I think who he was talking to might have been Elena, but in one of the sequences, he's saying about what he misses about back home, and he's very po-faced. He's very scene chewing, as you say, and he says, I just want to get back home to birthday parties, cool jazz, and hot pizza. And I thought, oh, God, Richard, don't do this, come on.
I hope that was a scene of improvisation. I hope that is something that he believes that is what everyone would miss. I mean, I'd miss pizza, at least. Like, even I suppose cool jazz music, because it does lend an ambience to things. But, no, I think his sort of, quote-unquote laid-back quality in the film, it sort of fits with there's an aloofness to the film, as well as if no one involved was particularly engaged or enamoured with the material, as if everyone was just going through the motions. There's a Fangoria article about WEBS and Bugs. Obviously, the both of them were filmed back-to-back in Toronto, as mentioned earlier. And in Fangoria 223, there's an interview with WEBS' director, Dave Wu, who, of course, probably better known as being the editor of John Woo's A Better Tomorrow 1 and 2, Choi Hock's Chinese Ghost Story and A Better Tomorrow 3, the director of The Bride with White Hair 2. He's a Hong Kong action thriller horror guy, and he's got some movies with tremendous talent. Like The Bride with White Hair 2 is fantastic. There is attempts that he tries to bring the Hong Kong style over to WEBS, but I don't know. In this interview, he says that the script wasn't ready when he got it, and he wasn't particularly enamoured with it to begin with. I think we are seeing WEBS as what it is, and that is a gun for hire job. Basically, It was for Wu to probably pay his bills that month, for everyone else involved to pay the bills that month, and that sort of it does reflect on screen. There's no sort of like sense of fun to it. There's no sense of even though Wu tries to go for like rapid fire incident, it's just very, very flat. There's no sense of excitement, and there's certainly if he pins all the flaws onto the film script, I can totally see that, because there is literally no attempts at all to make any of the characters interesting. Other than Grego, I cannot recall a single person in the movie, and I only revisited it 3 nights ago.
No, I did like the two guys that got stuck on Earth initially. Was it Ray and Sheldon? I thought Sheldon, being a slightly geeky guy, he had a bit of wit about him, and the two of them together do have a kind of a light relief to the whole thing. There's at least a tiny spark, no pun intended, to their sort of friendship. But other than that, no, very little else. Although of course, Dr. Richard Morelli, who they encountered in the other world, was a doctor who got the whole thing started. He was 30 years ago. He invented the machine that sort of got them there into this other world. I thought he was quite good. I was quite familiar with him from his appearances on the TV show The PSI Factor. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah, I remember that. I vaguely remember that. Yeah, that was Canadian as well, because the guy who played Morelli, Colin Fox, he's got a little bit of Canadian horror and schlock form. He's in Food of the Gods 2. He's in Scanners 3. So. And of course the Goosebumps TV series. He's this sort of perennial Canadian genre bit parter.
Oh no, he was in all 88 episodes of PSI Factor, which is I think it's like a Canadian X-Files, or a couple of years after. But they had like a Rod Sterling intro to every episode, and it was presented by
someone Canadian, surely.
Dan Aykroyd.
No way! I did not know that. I'm not. That's why you watched it.
Tell me a little about. Did you ever seen the TV show Sliders?
Yeah.
Do you think there's much of? I know they sort of share Paul Leonard being a producer in both Sliders and WEBS. But could you see any correlation between Sliders and WEBS? Do you see a lot of thematic kind of similarities?
God, I haven't seen Sliders since I was a kid, but in terms of the general setup is like something from an episode of Sliders, that they go into this other realm. I can certainly see, I can see where it would feed into WEBS, particularly with the producer and that. And obviously, this film was made with the sole intention of playing on SyFy. Sliders, of course, was it was very, very popular on the network. It was constantly, repeats were constantly playing. So I can see why they were, because part of the SyFy formula was to cater to their demographic, which is why they'd have people, with name value, in the sense of they're familiar to people of the channel, which is why you'd have people like, is it David Hewlett? Is that his name? From Cube, yeah. And obviously he was in Stargate, and then he'd go on to appear in things like Bo vs. Python. You'd have Lance Henriksen popping up in stuff because of Millennium, which was playing on the network. So they do tend to cater casting and story premises and concepts towards shows and other movies that their target audience would be familiar with. So I can totally see why they'd have just been like, we're going to make a film that's I Am Legend meets Sliders. I can see why they'd do something like that.
Yeah, to draw upon one of the parallels, obviously the parallel with the next film we're going to talk about, Bugs, the parallel with that is obviously the sci-fi thing, obviously, the Amber Light thing, obviously. But also, same director of photography, you had Richard Vincenti, who lensed both Webs and Bugs, but they're very different films. And I think here, I mean, if you watch them back to back, you'd be hard-pressed to sort of figure out that the same guy with cinematography films, wouldn't you? Because this is so drab and lifeless compared to the next film. Yeah,
even things like the effects in this aren't nowhere near as much fun as they are in Bugs. The Spider People. Well, there's the Spider Queen, who's played by model/actress Dylan Burke from Terminal Invasion and Jason X, and she's a mixture of practical and CGI. And she's probably the most visually interesting thing in the film. And certainly she has the best sort of giant spider type design, as like Steve Johnson's work in Arachnid. While I don't like Arachnid as a film, I think that the actual giant spider Steve Johnson created for that is excellent. And there are elements of the Spider Queen's design and physicality that recall the excellence of Johnson's work in there. Obviously, Johnson was nowhere near this movie. Instead, the special effects, makeup, and prosthetics were provided by David Scott and Jeremy McPherson. Scott, of course, probably most famous for working on Ginger Snaps, Jack Brooks' Monster Slayer, Clown, Bone Daddy, the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead, which, interestingly, as I sort of alluded to earlier, WEBS shares a similar sort of style and structure with, right down to the beach ending. It was made the year before Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. It's weird comparing them both next to each other. They're very structurally similar. But the actual spider people in the film, these mixtures of, they're half zombie, half spider, they are really, really crummy. They're just, I can't think of any way to describe them other than they're just Canadian extras with Halloween costume type vampire fangs shoved in their mouths and big furry spider gloves on. I mean, God, when they're running around after people doing friggin' jazz hands, it's just... It's very, very risible.
Yeah, it's not great. To be honest, I mean, I even was trying to sort of scratch the whole thing for some kind of hidden meaning, and I thought maybe there's a slight bit of homoerotica there, because you've got the spider freaks sort of killing all the women in order to keep the men. So I thought, maybe. But no, that's probably going a step too far for this. But no, I like the elements.
It's interesting, by the way, because Bugs, as we'll get to, I think that's rich in subtext. There's a lot of other stuff going on in Bugs, which again, like the effects, like the style of it, which makes it a vastly superior film.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move on to Bugs. Let's wrap Webs up. So, I mean, it's a good B movie. It's a good B feature for Bugs, I think, isn't it? Just to sort of as a comparison. So, I mean, maybe it's worth people picking up just to satisfy their sort of curiosity and sort of tick a box on their spiderless, but other than that, maybe one to avoid.
Yeah. I think as you say, the only reason to pick up WEBS is because it was made back to back with Bugs, and Bugs is the better film. This would be the type of thing where, like, years from now, if anyone ever wrote if there was suddenly some sort of, I don't know, revival in interest in Bugs, and someone wrote the complete definitive history of sci-fi's Bugs. WEBS would be the little footnote that this was its supporting feature, basically. This was the film that was, like, put out a few weeks beforehand to generate hype for it. But I have no desire to ever watch WEBS again, which is upsetting because I again, as I said, I had fond memories of it. And then I honestly thought, like, oh yeah, I really liked this, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it. And then when watching it, it just draining, boring, no sense of fun, naff effects.
You're listening to Natural Selection, the home of the DTV Creature Feature.
They're all dead. Everyone is dead.
Calm down. Where is Jack Ball?
Didn't you hear me? They're all dead.
I'm bringing in the CDC for this.
We don't have time to get them mobilized, so I need your SWAT team.
Done. Benton's team is ready.
We don't know what we're dealing with here, so I need everything you got.
Anything you want?
Lights. We need lights. Whatever we're looking for has been living in the darkness. Lights can give us an advantage.
What about a train? There's a lot of ground to be covered.
There is a surveyor car.
You stay out of this, Dave.
Tell me about the train.
It's well equipped, it's self-contained, self-propelled. It has communications and a closed-circuit video.
Sounds good. What's your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Dave Reynolds. I built the tunnel, so no one knows it better.
Obviously not well enough.
Can you drive this train?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Come on.
Mr. Petronovich, do you want Jack Ball's home number?
What the hell for?
Well, so you can call his wife, sir.
Bugs, the film that aired in September 2003, a couple of months after WEBS, and it's a whole different entity, really, isn't it? It's quite something compared to what we've just spent the last 20 minutes talking about. Yeah, you're a fan?
Big fan. Yeah, I think Bugs is excellent, and as well, I had very, very fond memories of this one. And obviously, based upon my experience with WEBS, I was thinking, oh God, I'm going to hate this. I'm going to hate Bugs. Watched it, nope, still holds up. Still loved it. It's just a great, great B movie. It just hits all the boxes that you want it to hit. And yeah, it's just great. Just a complete polar opposite of WEBS, which is so strange because it has so much of the same crew attached to it. You've got the script is once again written by Robinson Young, who also penned the scripts for a bunch of other Amberlight movies. Now, before we go on to other crew people, I think Robinson Young, who obviously, as well as him, he wrote the script with Patrick Doody and Chris Valenziano, who were a separate writing team. But I think Robinson Young is a pseudonym for someone.
Yeah.
If you look at his credits, they're all Amberlight productions. I don't actually think he really exists. It's pure speculation, but based upon what we've sort of learned, looking at the histories of like Concord and Full Moon and companies like that for the Schlock and Awe book, that you tend to find in each company there's one enterprising producer who, he has sort of artistic desires as well as financial ones, and he maybe fancies himself as a writer or director, and he'll do something behind the scenes under a pseudonym so as not to come between like his day job. I think Robinson Young is maybe someone behind the scenes at Amberlight who was just belting out these screenplays to order because writing was maybe something he was interested in.
Yeah, without doubt. Obviously, we may well get an email from Robinson Young, saying otherwise. But yeah, I agree. It must be someone like Paul Leonard or Derek Rappaport or someone within the ranks there who fancied a stab of it. It's too much of a coincidence just to have those four credits that they've got.
Yeah. As well, as you said, we've got the photography once again by Richard Vincenti, and it's completely different this time. There is a real polished, slick look to Bugs. Vincenti, of course, in addition to WEBS, he also shot Threshold for Amberlight as well, which, as with the Robinson Young thing, sort of links into the fact that these movies are made on a production line. But yeah, Bugs, a vastly, vastly superior film, and probably it's one of the best films that we've looked at, I think.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, just to sort of let people catch up with what we're going on about, it's about an entomologist, isn't it? who is Angie Everhart, the great Angie Everhart, who ends up accompanying an FBI guy played by Antonio Sabato Jr., and they team up with a load of commandos, guys in army guys, to inspect the subway, as there's sort of something going on down there that may involve a giant bug. But in parallel with that, there's what starts off with the Downtown Reaper, which is a kind of cool thing. There's a like a serial killer going around the town, and initially the film starts off with hinting that it may have been a guy, but soon develops into, obviously, it couldn't be anything human.
It takes maybe about 10 to 15 minutes to once Sabato Jr. and Everhart and the SWAT team get down into the tunnel, once they get down into the subway tunnel to start looking for this bug that they, that's when the film picks up. But it takes about 15 minutes to get there, because the big flaw for me of Bugs, well, I'd say big, it's it's a splash in the ocean. Once you get past it, it's over. But the flaw of Bugs is that initially it frames itself as an investigation picture. It frames itself like it's going to be a police procedural, which really is redundant, because in the prologue we've already seen what's caused this violent killing of a police officer in a tunnel. We've seen that it's some sort of weird scorpion type thing, some weird monster living in the subway tunnels. But if I'm gonna pick apart Bugs because of that, I'd have to criticize something like Octopus 2 and Python, which they approach their creature carnage from a similar angle. They were framed as investigation pictures before common sense prevailed, and they realised, well, people already know what's going on. Let's throw all the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks and have some fun with it. And thankfully, Bugs nixes that bit for about 10 to 15 minutes, because I think that's the weakest point of the film, that opening.
It's about 23 minutes in the film, the Subway Party Massacre, which is kind of sounds like a slasher film in there somewhere. I think that Subway Party Massacre is just sublime. I think it's the best part of the film. I think it could well be the best sequence in almost any sci-fi movie I've seen, especially the last few shots of that. You've got like sort of monochrome and red theme to like those last few the sequence, and then you've got that last bit where the subway doors just gently open and blood comes out from there. I thought that sequence, I mean, it's only, well, the massacre itself is a couple of minutes, but the last few shots, which are probably only about 10 to 15 seconds, I thought absolutely something else. Absolutely something else. Really, really just, what you say about the first 15 minutes, which kind of throws a bit of a Mickey in regard to the direction it wants to go in. That piece on 23 minutes really does sort of inject you and wakes you up and really gets you into the film. It's a really momentous.
Yeah, it reminded me. I know we jokingly mentioned bats in our intro, but it actually reminded me of a scene that occurs in Louis Morneau's Bats. The bit early on where the entire town gets massacred by all the bats and stuff. It reminded me of that, and it has a great sense of chaos and frenzy to it. And I do think it's hampered a touch by the budget, but Conti stages it really, really well. A lot of the time we're like looking in through the windows of the carriage. We're getting just brief glimpses of the chaos that's like unfolding inside it all as the people are getting ripped apart by this giant bug. Yeah, the train, the monster stuff. I mean, as a whole, I like the coupling of trains and monsters. I just think that like Creep, like Midnight Meat Train. I just think I really like that aesthetic. And yeah, in Bugs, there's a real good rhythmic quality to it that I think that brings to mind the other sort of what I'd term brilliant train horror set pieces, like on Predator 2 and Faust Love of the Damned. There's a real rhythm going on to it, and like you say, the kiss off, that when the train finally stops at the station and those doors open and it's just a mass of sloppy red blood dripping out, just a great visual. The director Joseph Conti has got a real great visual sense. It's a shame he hasn't really done anything much since, because the his aesthetic is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, you could never paint bugs so simply as just being bugs on a train, could you? But in saying that, it's not the height of originality, is it? You know, it's very derivative with regard to aliens rather, you know, for example, that to the degree of the Marines being sent in to deal with the issue.
Yeah.
Also, you've got a touch of mimic in there. You've got the whole Jaws effect with the evil CEO of Petrovich Enterprises being determined, you know, not to ruin his big thing. So, yeah, very derivative, but who cares? Because it's just really, really good fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love the whole, you know, because at first they all think that it's just one bug that's doing it, and that's another thing I love about it, where when Sabato Jr. and Everhart and the SWAT guys go down into the subway, they readily accept that, yep, this is a bug that's doing this. It's a giant bug. There's no bullshit. There's no sort of like, what do you mean? You've got to be kidding me. How can a bug do it? Like, that they accept that this is the reality and they are going to try and catch it and get rid of it. So obviously it completely flips it around, because once they get down there, it's soon very, very apparent that it's not just a bug. As per the title, there's a shitload of, and I love it. So we get that, you know, like you say, we get the whole aliens thing, which is very cool. That aliens sort of style of shooting, that Starship Troopers style of shooting. And it's, you know, and it's all done for the price of what a single xenomorph or the price of what Paul Verhoeven probably paid for like one single bug in Starship Troopers. It's very, very well done. All the shooting and all the gunplay and the running around. There's a touch of like hyperrealism to it, you know, and it heightens this immersive feeling that Conti conjures. You know, you actually feel like you're in the middle of a war, which is, you know, the gunshots are deafening. The visuals are just pulling you in. You're getting ragged around all over the place. It's got probably some of the best shaky cam stuff out there, you know, and obviously done well before shaky cam became an annoying cliche. But one thing that strikes me about it, and I mentioned it in WEBS, that Bugs does have like another sort of subtext going on. All that stuff, you know, it's almost like an Iraq War illusion. You know, like you could maybe read a little bit of that into WEBS, but, you know, I know the invasion of Iraq happened in March 2003, so it was probably a little too early. You know, like this WEBS and Bugs were both probably filmed well before that. But, you know, I can remember 2003 time, you know, there was conflict was in the zeitgeist, and, you know, you only have to look at forebearers like them in the 1950s to see that creature features have always reflected the fears of the times. You know, we've said it before with like They Nest and stuff, where that's a reflection of, you know, the millennium bug anxieties and things like that. So with war, with conflict being such an overhanging thing at that part of the noughties, I can see why, you know, it would feed into Bugs, and it would sort of, you know, it's maybe like an early example of the Iraq War being reflected in a genre film. And
there's also a case for a bit of post 9/11 paranoia as well to it.
Yeah.
Bugs has a bit of a long history, really. You know, in contrast with WEBS, which was very much sort of put together at the last minute, and it felt it. Bugs, the development of that, because it stretches back a fair way, I think that's echoed in the film itself. I mean, we're going back. We're originally set to go in Mexico, in the desert, was it? New Mexico desert?
Yeah.
A whole different vibe, but, you know.
I mean, you can tell that translates on screen that, like, Joseph Conti had been wanting to make this movie for years, and eventually it just so happened that when SyFy put the call out that they were looking for bug-type things, you know, that's where he got his hand in, said, I've got this idea. It was originally set in the Mexican desert, and it had, like, a lot... I mean, it's got a lot of bugs in anyway. You know, there's a lot of creature carnage on display, but there was a lot more. There was a bigger range of chaos, because it was designed to have a much, much bigger budget than, like, you know, the approximately 2 million bracket that Bugs ultimately had. Anyway, Conti pitched it to SyFy, who pitched it to Amberlight, and they loved the idea, both SyFy and Amberlight, and they said they were happy to make it just with a few stipulations. So it couldn't be an army of bugs, as originally envisioned, taking over a city. It had to be smaller and it had to be more contained. So Conti, and again, this cements the sort of class that he was going for. He wasn't seeing it as just doing a gun for hire gig like maybe Wu was. You know, he described his influences in Fangoria for Bugs as being Lifeboat and Jaws.
Which is interesting. I mean, Lifeboat is a crazy influence, but when you think about it, it does make sense. Going back to the special effects on this, we've got a guy who obviously you're very familiar with, which is Paul Jones, who started out, of course, with Anthony Hickox on waxwork and kind of thing before graduating to some Canadian films like Ginger Snaps. Great job.
Yeah, tremendous. I mean, like you say, he has got an amazing pedigree. You know, he was born. Jones was born in Shrewsbury in England, and he got his start with Bob Keane. So, which is why he ended up working on Waxwork 1 and 2, Nightbreed, Hellraiser 2 and 3, Hardware. Stuff he's done since includes Wishmaster, Blade, Shadow Builder, the amazing Wolf stuff in Ginger Snaps, and most recently he's been doing the effects work for the What We Do in the Shadows TV series. So, you know, to say that he's a talent, I think that's a hell of an understatement, because and his design work in Bugs is just wonderful. It's so icky and so gross, you know. And to me, you look at the design of these bugs and like, you know, they're like it's as if Jones has looked at the most frightening insects that there is and took bits from each of them, you know. So you've got a bit of spider, you've got a bit of scorpion, you've got a bit of wasp, you know, and they're very, very cool looking monsters, cool looking and very formidable. You know, you actually believe these could rip you apart.
Absolutely. I like Sabato Jr. in this film as well. I think he's a good actor. Again, he's someone that we have an affinity with. I mean, he was in things like Crash Landing.
Yeah.
He's a UFO regular as well for Philip J. Roth, a number of his films. And I think he suits this material well, whereby Grieco maybe just didn't really feel right for WEBS. I think Sabato Jr. kind of is a perfect fit for Bugs.
It's just a shame that Sabato Jr. is such a horrific arsehole in real life.
Oh,
you know, have you not heard? Do you not know any stuff about? Well, he is just a Trump nut, basically. So, absolute crank. He reckons that he was blacklisted because of his from Hollywood because of his supporting of Donald Trump, and because he was conservative, you know. And he actually had the temerity to liken being snubbed by studios for his weird political beliefs to being akin to a Jewish person being persecuted in the Holocaust. Just completely deluded, right-wing dickhead. Bigoted too. Very bigoted guy as well. He doesn't like how progressive California is, apparently, which is a bit strange considering he was a Calvin Klein model and an actor, which, you know, considering he doesn't like... He's not a fan of Jewish people. He's not a fan of gay people. You're working in the entertainment industry, pal. Like, you are surrounded by people that you hate. No wonder you're getting blacklisted. But, not...
Soured my whole impression of Bugs, to be honest. I'm going to burn my copy when I get home. Let's separate the art from the artist, you know. Yes. But let's not go down. Let's not bring Victor Salva into this.
Oh, you've done it again. Go on, sorry. Without you mentioning some sort of celebrity paedophile.
It's a great little, great segment, wouldn't it? And today's celebrity paedophile is, so Bugs does share some weird similarities with WEBS, other than the fact they were made for SyFy. Both the lead actors in these two films went on to do movies for Asylum. Sabato Jr. went on to do John Carter of Mars for Mark Atkins a couple of years after this. While Richard Grieco went on to film Almighty Thor with Chris Olin Ray. So, you know, from SyFy to Asylum, it seems like a fairly natural progression. But also, Grieco and Everhart from Bugs, they were in the same film together. They were in a Predator film.
Which one?
Sexual Predator.
Oh, of course. Sexual, there we go.
Which was
sort of twist to this.
I have to have a Creature Features or link to it. Yeah, that was released back in 2001, and for some reason it had 52 seconds cut from the UK DVD release. So yeah, if you're in the mood for a sexual predator, make sure you get the American.
Greco and Everhart weren't they also in Garden of Evil, aka The Gardener, which is with Malcolm McDowell, directed by James Hickox, the director of Blood Surf, and of course the younger brother of director Anthony Hickox. It's just weird how all this stuff, all roads lead to B movies, as far as I'm concerned.
It's incestuous in a good way.
The best possible way. Tracking all these links of it that's where the fun is.
It's addictive, right? So Bugs, it's a must-have, isn't it? Really, I mean, out of 9 episodes and probably 10 hours of doing this, I mean, it's the essential purchase. Essential purchase. Yeah,
it's just great fun. If you are hankering for a stripped-down meat and potatoes spin on Aliens, Starship Troopers, with some very, very cool monster work. And a good visual sense, Conti he can really shape a scene. I don't think there's a single shot or cut wasted in Bugs. And it's just an absolute pleasure. I could happily put it on again right now and still enjoy the hell out of it. And it's something that I am actually going to make a conscious effort to do more, is to revisit it, because this time it really did blow me away.
Absolutely. Great film. Go and buy it. Can't stream it, buy it. Secondhand, £1, bargain. Thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure to have you in this weird environment. Hopefully next episode we can have a more organic feel to the episode and a slightly better audio, but we shall see. But yeah, thanks for all your messages in the last 4 weeks. Keep on liking our podcast on iTunes and the various platforms. Keep on reviewing it if you can, which also helps just to get us a little bit more publicity. And but mainly just thank you for listening. My name is Dave Wain. You can catch me on Twitter at @TheDaveWain.
And you can find me at Matty Budrewicz.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the Schlock and Awe page on Instagram, while you're welcome to stalk Matty and Dave on Twitter. See you next time on Natural Selection.